Next on Investigative Report. Doomsday Scenario. What happens after we run out of oil? Scientists predict that by the year 2060, our planet would have exhausted all fossil fuels. In effect, a global civilization, chiefly built around energy, would come to a crashing halt. Depending on which season of the year this takes place, coupled with extreme weather, will predict how devastated civilization gets. In a drastic pre-industrialized existence, all power plants currently using fossil fuels would shut down, making electric cars as obsolete as gas vehicles. This will bring about a global cascading effect that will cause massive unemployment, rioting in the streets, coupled with people freezing to death in their own homes. Survivors could only expect mass starvation due to a collapse in the distribution system and the inability to plant or harvest crops. And now, Doomsday Scenario. What happens after we run out of oil? Whether we choose to believe it or not, our fossil fuel supplies are quickly running out. To give this doomsday scenario context, we will imagine reserves being depleted by the time this woman's newborn reaches the age of 37 years. That's right, I said a mere 37 years is all she or any of us has left before we end up reverting back to the mid-1800s when homes and businesses were not heated by fossil fuels. Most infants through the age of adolescence are far too preoccupied with having fun and how they look over worrying about energy independence. But by the time this young lady reaches her teen years, our planet would have burned through half of its oil reserves. Further down her path of growth towards adulthood and marriage, she is sure to see world leaders sounding the alarm on how we need to cut back on personal consumption of fuel. Unfortunately, by the time her firstborn child goes off to school, we would have run out of all remaining crude oil and in another 10 years, depleted our coal reserves. On that fate-filled day, every citizen on the planet Earth will know what feeling stark terror really means. As the last of internal combustion engines exhaust their fuel and power companies begin their rolling blackouts, life, limb, and loved one will be threatened. For energy and heat, countries will turn their attention back to virgin forests they had abandoned since the mass use of oil. But night will bring an eternal type of darkness that invites looters to the street, as evidenced by the New York City blackout of 1977. The New York City blackout of 1977 was caused by a series of lightning strikes that hit the Buchanan South substation and two of its backups. But the full power outage was the fault of Con Edison Power. Con Edison, through a series of mistakes, exacerbated the problem by prematurely shutting down some lines and by not shutting down other transmission points. In these actual photos, you can see what to expect from your worst fears in a countrywide power outage. But oddly enough, this was a very short blackout for the damage that the city would sustain. New York City will be in the dark from 8:34 p.m. Wednesday, July the 13th to about the same time the following night, or a 24-hour cycle. But if you were an outsider visiting the Big Apple, you would have believed that it was total anarchy. As night fell, looting and vandalism became widespread, affecting 31 different neighborhoods in an economically depressed economy on one of the hottest summers on record. Possibly the hardest hit sections were Crown Heights, where 75 stores on a 5-block stretch were looted and damaged, and Bushwick, where arson was rampant, with some 25 fires still burning the next morning. At one point, 2 blocks of Broadway in Brooklyn, which separates Bushwick and Bedford-Stuyvesant, were on fire. 35 blocks of Broadway were destroyed, 134 stores were looted, and 45 of them were also set ablaze. Thieves stole 50 new Pontiacs from a Bronx car dealership. In Brooklyn, youths were seen backing up cars to stores, tying ropes around the store gates, and using the cars to pull the gates away, then looting the stores. There were 550 police officers injured in the mayhem, and 4,500 looters were arrested. Mayor Abe Beame spoke during the blackout about what citizens were up against and what the cost would be. Ultimately, the mayor was blamed and lost a recall referendum. With extreme heat in our northern cities or extreme cold in our southern city of Dallas, Texas in the year 2021, weather has always been a factor with power outages. Prior to this storm, Texas had provided critically needed oil to the United States for the last 129 years. But even with as much energy as the Lone Star State has, they were not prepared for one of the largest snowstorms in a decade. This snowstorm would freeze all drilling operations in the state and give us our next example of what happens when oil and electricity run dry. On February 15, 2021, Winter Storm Uri brought unusually cold temperatures to the Lone Star State. This resulted in multiple power outages in which oil and gas production was greatly impacted. By the storm's end, 246 Texans had lost their lives attributed to the storm across 77 Texas counties. In dollar amounts, the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas estimated that the state's storm-related financial losses would range from $80 billion to $130 billion. This would make it the costliest winter storm on record and the costliest natural disaster recorded in the United States at the time. It was also the deadliest winter storm in North America since 1993's storm of the century, and that storm killed 318 people. The winter storm caused power grids to fail across the U.S., causing blackouts for over 5.2 million homes and businesses, the vast majority of which were in the state of Texas, which became one of the largest blackout events in modern U.S. history. On February 14th through the 15th, the storm dropped prolific amounts of snow across Texas and Oklahoma. As a result of the winter storm and a cold wave, power grids unable to sustain the higher than normal energy and heating demand from residential and business customers failed across the Texas interconnection. At the peak of outages, at least 4.5 million Texans residents were left without electricity. At the height of the storm, two electricity commissions servicing Texas were Southwest Power Pool and the Electricity Reliability Council of Texas, or ERCOT. These organizations ordered rolling blackouts for 14 states amid frigid temperatures. As far as Texas, the rolling blackouts will lead to calls from Governor Greg Abbott to the Texas legislature to conduct investigations into preparations and decisions undertaken by ERCOT in advance of the storm. Unfortunately, with the unpredictability of weather, some people are naively made to believe that wind energy is a substitute for dwindling oil reserves. Currently, the average wind turbine in use is about 3 megawatts and has a capacity factor of 30%. So roughly 7,884 megawatts per hour, or 21.6 megawatt hours per day. It would take about 1.26 million of those wind turbines covering the entire state of New York to power the whole United States of America. Others are fooled into believing that solar power is a better alternative to depleted fossil fuels. But the largest circular solar farm in existence couldn't power but 2% of any city on a good day. Crescent Dune Solar Energy Project is a solar thermal power project with 10,347 mirrors on 296 acres with an installed capacity of 110 megawatts and is located near Tonopah, about 190 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The Dune Solar Powered Energy Project not only came in over budget, but was shut down while in operation for not delivering power as promised. And if you believe that this is a tragedy, just imagine that the world's most powerful military could go without operational fuel. The Air Force runs through approximately 2 billion gallons of gas every year at a cost of $7 billion. It costs more than just dollars to keep the Air Force 5,625 aircraft aloft. Now, in total, the Department of Defense uses 4,600,000,000 U.S. gallons of fuel annually, an average of 12,600,000 U.S. gallons of fuel per day. Losing this much-needed critical fuel for defense will make all militaries obsolete overnight. Now, not that it would bother citizens who have been attacked by invading militaries. This new fuel structure would change countries back to fighting only for the defense of their external borders, and any fighting would take place on the ground by infantry and cavalry troops. But is this really feasible? The United States has active duty military troops stationed in nearly 150 countries. And in all those countries, they have close air support. Without close air support, you have no ground military. It would seem that fuel and crude oil is very important. Take the United States combat equivalent drone, for example. This aircraft can stay aloft for 34 hours and fly higher than any plane, but it cannot do this without the assistance from the derivatives of fossil fuels. The U.S. has the largest and most advanced Navy in the world, which expends approximately 30% of the Department of Defense overall fuel sales, with an annual usage of 1.134 billion gallons of fuel. Countries need fuel for sea, land, and especially air, for planes that carry even the President of the United States. This plane is needed for locations where a phone call won't make the difference. Air Force One has a full fuel capacity of 53,611 gallons. Air Force One's electrical power needs can be supplied by a nuclear power plant, but nuclear power plants currently supply only 18.2% of all of America's electrical needs and carries with it the stigma of Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island. Our last choice could be hydroelectric power, but America only produces about 6.2% of that fuel at any given time. Now, this method of delivery for a city's electrical need is no more a guarantee than fossil fuel, for it is buttressed against droughts, floods, and lake ice formations. So I guess for now, as we wind down our fossil fuel dependency, we need to focus on better answers to the problems we face. Yes, while we still have time to save a world economy that will end up missing out on over 6,000 items fossil fuel provides, such as your favorite knit sweater, bicycle tires, nail polish, fishing lures, dresses of all types, perfume, hand sanitizer, dish liquid, vitamin capsules, deodorant, Life Vest, skis, hair coloring, roofing felt, lipstick, lotion, skates, common aspirin, toothbrush and toothpaste, eyeglasses, the iPhone, bandages, artificial limbs, contact lenses, hair rollers, and dentures. All these products made from what used to be called black gold. On the day we reach gallon zero, the world witnessed a crash of the global financial system that will match the confidence lost in our system of governance. The devastation to mental stability won't primarily come from millions in the oil industry, as much as it will from the global community that depends on their production. It will come from ordinary, everyday people who were gainfully employed but are now being cast to the streets to depend on and defend themselves for survival. It will come from the mass diseases that always follow a breakdown in the sanitary conditions and systems. A breakdown of emotional confidence following natural disasters that no antidepressant could ever hope to soothe. In those disasters, without the aid of fossil fuels for aircraft and fire, wildfires will run out of control until they burn millions of acres, similar to Canada's last wildfire. At that time, we will witness runaway combustion that will be capable of wiping out thousands of lives, property, and endangered species, as well as the saturability of rainwater. And then there is the foreordained loss of entire cities that will rival the slow-paced recovery of Hurricane Katrina. Without electricity or machinery, there is no way to pump municipalities dry after a devastating flood. More importantly, there would be no way to get drinking water from purification plants to homes, because even that water needs an electronic pumping source. In those days, boiling water will become the norm to prevent waterborne diseases that are responsible for 7 million illnesses and 7,000 deaths annually. Our once beautiful skyscrapers and infrastructure will decay. They will decay because the vast majority of replacement parts are derived from oil. And even if the replacement parts were on hand, without fuel, no one could hoist the weight of those repair parts high enough into the air without a crane. What ultimately follows will be mass starvation, with the breakdown of currency and the collapse of grocery shelf food replacement system. In those days, gasoline stations will serve as little more than monuments to a time in the past when things were better. Technology and iPhones that once existed on electricity will serve as little more than paperweights. The people will occupy empty buildings and parking structures by day to sleep, but cautiously stay awake at night for safety. Many will face mental instability as they ponder why it was that governments waited too late to address this crisis. Some will try to stick to the homes they owned prior to disaster, even though they are not warmed in the winter nor cooled in the summer. Nights will appear longer without the aid of streetlights, as many will come to understand how past homeless persons felt in a sea of people without help. Believe it or not, candles will be worth more than any luxurious goods in our current day. Their value will be based upon a place for the family to gather, as well as a symbol of hope. Hope to chase away the fears of ultimately stepping into the darkness without the aid of the police officers we once complained about.